everybody. Yesterday, Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, on the Rush Limbaugh show. We want to get right into listening to the interview, and here's my feedback. Let's get started.
Encouragement and support, and I know we enjoy the prayers of millions of your listeners around the country, and the president and I are grateful every day. But I have to tell you, every day I go to work with this team that the president assembled at the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Every day that I hear about the way that our healthcare workers have stepped up to provide the level of care that every one of us would want for a member of our family. Every day I hear about the efforts of hardworking Americans, businesses that have stepped up in this whole of America approach, and every day I see the progress we're making because of the cooperation of the American people. I'm inspired. It really has been extraordinary. We are making progress. We're continuing to see all the way through this morning that on the West Coast, in Washington State and California, cases remain low and steady. And because of those healthcare workers, because of the way the American people have responded to the federal guidelines, to state and local officials, we continue to see that evidence that the New York Metro is past its peak. Hospitalizations continue to decline. Areas like New Orleans and Detroit, Denver, and elsewhere are all making measurable progress. We're getting there, Rush, because early on, the president made it clear that we're all in this together. It would take all of us to do it. The president's coronavirus guidelines for America were taken to heart by tens of millions of Americans.
I also want to point out here, you didn't exactly give anybody a choice when you started making guidelines and the states started shutting down businesses. That wasn't voluntary on the part of the American people, because it's already been made very clear that the American people did not want the economy shut down for this. But you can use the word volunteering. That's just like a nonsense way of trying to get past the fact that you declared that they have to do it and initiated a process that the states followed suit on.
And we are slowing the spread, and every day we're one day closer to putting this coronavirus in the past and putting America back to work.
Look, I don't want to speak for you. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know you. And it's got to rip your heart out, sir, when there were 26 million people now in 2 months filing for unemployment compensation.
26 million. As a matter of fact, it's over 26 million. It's nearly 26.5 million. And by next week, I predict it will probably be right around 31 million people. I don't know if he does it in this conversation with Pence, but I will point out that according to numbers, that means that we have lost all the jobs we have gained and more since the 2008 crash. I guess you could call it the 2008 crash.
And many of these people are getting impatient. They're protesting in certain states because their attitude, hey, my state's not New York. It's not the New York metro area. Why can't I go back to work? And these people protesting are being ripped to shreds by the media, doing their best to mischaracterize what their objectives are. What do you make of the protests? And if we're getting closer, what's the demarcation point where you can see that we can make an official shift to reopening from the flattening of the curve policies?
Well, I want to promise you and every one of your listeners who shares that view that there's no one in America that wants to reopen this country more than President Donald Trump. And that was the reason why 1 week ago today, the president directed the White House Coronavirus Task Force to lay out guidelines for opening up America again. And it's all reflective of the president's sense, all of our sense, that, look, America works when America is working. Then
let America work. Then let America work.
The American people who are coming out, who are giving voice, who are expressing that sentiment to their governors, we believe play an important role in moving our nation forward. But the most important thing from our perspective, and the president reflected on this yesterday, is that we think that there is a framework for safely and responsibly opening up our states. And I just recommend all of your listeners look at the president's guidelines for opening up America again. It's a three-phased approach that says once we have 14 consecutive days of declining cases, and we make sure that the states make sure that their hospital systems have the capacity for whatever may come, then they can begin to ease those social distancing rules to begin to reopen their economies. And then as they make successive progress, that we can do that. We think that's the responsible and safe way to move forward. But I have to tell you, seeing protests around the country, seeing people stepping forward, I share their passion. I know the president shares their passion.
So let's be clear about something. There are three phases that the federal government has outlined for reopening the economy. And they essentially begin on the week of the 15th of April, okay? Three phases are phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Each one is supposed to take a cycle period of 2 weeks. So you go 14 days, one phase. If things are working out, you go 14 days in phase 2, and then you go another 14 days, and then you get to go do phase 3. What that means, based on that timeline, is that you would fully reopen on June 1st of 2020. That means that almost 2.5 months of the country being shut down. That's ridiculous if you think that that's going to in any way make it possible for so many businesses to relaunch. That's absurd.
For reopening America, getting America working again. But we want to do it in a way that ensures that we won't have a resurgence of the coronavirus, and that
you won't have a resurgence if you allow people to have herd immunity, buddy. You keep denying that that's the case, but if you would let the country just build up herd immunity, we get past this a lot faster than what you're doing.
That once we open America again, that we'll keep America open. That's what we're working toward every single day.
Yeah, you don't want to have
to tell you.
You don't want to have to shut it down again after it's reopened.
And you wouldn't be able to. If you try to open up this country and then shut it back down again, man, you could kiss your seat in the White House goodbye. You could kiss it goodbye. You may already have to kiss it goodbye because you fell into this without any data and you just jumped without processing data first. You jumped. That was not smart. That was not smart. You had no idea what was going to happen, so you decided instead to shut the economy of a country down, resulting in, after 5 weeks, 26.5 million people being unemployed. You jumped too fast. And if you tried to shut this country down again economically like that, not only could you kiss your position in the White House goodbye, but you could kiss your chance of getting people to follow you goodbye again too. Because it's already starting to come out that this was like a cry wolf situation. They talk more about this in the interview later, but you just try to shut down the economy again, you'll see how quickly you'll have a massive revolt from a number of people, the American people.
No, and that was the phased approach in the president's guidelines for opening up America again, is that we honestly believe that, the old adage that you walk before you run, and I think most Americans understand this, and I think most of the people that are stepping forward and saying that they want to get on with it and they want to start opening their states up understand that as well. That we certainly understand that the fundamental liberties in the Constitution don't disappear during a public health emergency. We respect the freedom of speech of every American. And as the president said, here's our guidelines to the governors. But I'm confident the governors around America are going to be listening to their citizens and hearing that desire for people to be back at work. And that'll play an important part. Important part of informing state decisions by governors, by state and local authorities. And it's important to remember, too, that guidelines the president outlined are recommendations for how governors around America could open up again on a statewide level, but also they can be implemented on a county-by-county level. I mean, Rush, there are counties across America, nearly 25% of counties across America who have very, very little incidence of the coronavirus at all. And so we're giving this guidance to governors. We'll have another conference call tomorrow with all the nation's governors to begin to lay out how we're scaling testing all across the country, surging medical supplies. But we really do believe that the guidelines for opening up America, again, provide a framework for putting the coronavirus in the past as quickly
that's exactly
as possible
and
opening the economy up.
As conservatives, we've always been told that the states are great laboratories, that we're not a country as diverse as we are. We're not maybe always a one-size-fits-all policy-wise. So I like that. The counties can try it, see what happens. It's a perfect opportunity for me to bring up Governor Kemp. Now, Governor Kemp is a Republican governor of Georgia. He has decided to open up nail salons and barber shops and bowling alleys soon, restaurants next week, and everybody is reacting like this is the absolute worst thing he could do. It's a big, big, big mistake. But he's saying he's got his own data. He's got his data in Florida. He's got his statistics. He's got his health experts who are telling him.
And by the way, I think Rush meant Georgia, not Florida. Florida's Brian Kemp is the governor of Georgia. But also what Brian Kemp is doing, Governor Kemp is doing by reopening Georgia faster, is he's also introducing herd immunity to the people faster, which means you're going to have more deaths, you're going to have more people who get ill, but that was already going to happen. The shutdown, as you'll hear one of his callers talk about a little bit later, the shutdown was not to stop the number of deaths. It was to stop the speed of the deaths and the illnesses and the hospitalizations. It was not designed to stop the deaths, because you're not going to stop the deaths if the virus exists and there's an absolute no cure-all for it. It's going to kill whoever it's going to kill. You're talking about, it's almost like you're running from death, and you just keep running from death. But if death is going to get you, it's going to get you. And if you have a pre-existing condition, that makes it more likely that you can have serious complications that could lead to death. If it wasn't corona, it was going to be the flu. It was going to be a mutation of any other kind of a virus that could have come along. So this is not stopping death. It's trying to essentially elude death or elude infection, and it's not going to prevent it. Not even a vaccine completely prevents it. But what Governor Kemp is doing, to get back to the point, is he's now, as a result of opening up businesses, he is introducing and exposing the people of Georgia, and I think smartly so, to the idea of herd immunity, which means that people who can get it and who are, which everybody, I guess, technically can get it, but the more exposure you have to it, the more likely you are to develop an immunity to it. So that's what Governor Kemp is doing by opening up sooner than later.
It's going to be fine. And he's saying his constituents are getting impatient. They want to go back to work and save their livelihoods. Yesterday, the president said, I wish he wouldn't do it, but I'm not going to tell him not to. If I were by Dr. Fauci, same thing. What kind of challenge does this give you as you're trying to marshal your policy across the country? What do you expect to happen in Georgia that you wish wouldn't happen?
Well, I think the president was very clear yesterday that he thought there were aspects of Georgia's plan that to him seemed too soon. But to your point, I mean, the president has created a framework here where we want governors to make those decisions on a state-by-state level.
Trump didn't create the framework for those decisions. That's called the Constitution.
The one thing you know this president well, Rush, I mean, you'll always know where President Trump stands. But our health experts weighed in on that yesterday as well. But our conviction is that by laying out the guidelines for opening up America again, we've given every governor in every state and territory in the country what we believe is the best counsel for how to safely.
And that's a key choice of words, by the way, counsel, because they cannot tell them how to do it. They can counsel them how to do it. There's a number of states, I think this was 8 states before Georgia opens up and before Texas is predicted to open up, that never shut down. South Dakota, all the other states, even though they were all declared part of the national emergency, that did not shut down. They've allowed their people to continue to work, to go to work. The coronavirus has gotten into their communities. Surely it has not evaded the states for whatever reason. South Dakota doesn't have a big enough population. I'm not going there. Surely it has. But there is a higher likelihood, but because of the spacing, also because of the access or the exposure people have had to it, that they have already built up herd immunity. We'll talk about that a lot during the program. So just want to make that very clear.
And responsibly reopen. We'll continue to share that guidance in that council, but ultimately it'll be up to those states, up to their health advisors, and up to the people of their state to determine the best course forward.
Okay, now I know time is running. Let me ask you a couple of things about testing and antibodies. The Democrats, who I just get the sense are very happy with this shutdown because they think it's going to improve their electoral chances in November. I'm not asking you to confirm that. I didn't throw that out. I'm very cynical about them, sir. But they are out there claiming that we need to have massive testing before we can reopen the country. You guys have done pretty good on ramping up testing. We have the point. How good is a test anyway? You test me today, I'm negative, but what if I catch it next week? Is testing what is the benefit of having this massive testing the Democrats are talking about?
So this is also something that Hannity has talked about, another quote unquote conservative talk show host. He's talked about the fact that, in New York, to open up New York, what we need to do is, we're going to have testing in every building. They put a thing up to your head and they take your temperature. And then, you got to get tested before you go in that building. You know what I'm saying? You got to go get tested. Well, see, the problem is that you could test positive. You could test negative on one day, and 3 days later you could test positive. It's about exposure, which means that in order to know for sure if people are carrying the virus, you would have to literally test them virtually every day to make sure that they don't have it, which doesn't make for much of a chance to work because you're too busy getting damn tested.
Well, first, thanks for acknowledging what this president did with regard to testing in America. I mean, it is remarkable to think that 1 month ago, our nation had tested 80,000 people for the coronavirus. And as we sit here today, we are rapidly approaching having tested 5 million people.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
And, well, the only reason it happened is because President Trump, early on in this process, brought in all of the top commercial laboratories in the country and basically created an alliance between them to scale up testing at a level that had never been seen in the history of this country. And one of the things that we've been working with governors on is to literally activate all of the testing resources that they have. But let me say, your point is so well taken, Rush, about...
Let's also talk a little bit about, so there's supposedly, number I heard that there was in the range of almost 850,000, maybe a little bit more, of people who had been tested positive or presumably had cases of the coronavirus. Okay? Not hospitalized, but people who had tested positive or presumably positive for the coronavirus. 1 second. I just realized I didn't hit the mute button. Sorry about that. I apologize. I'm a naughty boy. I tremendously apologize for that. I will probably edit that out during my edit session. Anyways, so Kingsley, you're an idiot. Okay, so that's 850,000 people who have been tested presumably or positive for the coronavirus. Let me start again. So that means that there have been approximately 850,000 or more now that have been tested positive or presumably positive for the coronavirus. They've done 5 million tests. I do not know if those tests show those who have had it, who no longer have it, or it shows those who currently have it. Meaning, I don't know if that test also analyzes antibodies. Meaning those who have it somewhere in their immune system that it existed at one point in them, but they fought it off. Their immune system fought it off. So with 5 million tests, I would suggest that it probably does not take into account antibodies, and it only tests the frontline information that shows if you have the virus.
About testing is important, but there's so much rhetoric about testing that, again, I would point people back to the guidelines for opening up America again. What we contemplate, the role of testing would be in phase 1, we want to have enough testing to test everybody that has symptoms, right? We want to test anybody they've been in contact with.
So that's also an important point. The 5 million people who've been tested for coronavirus, the 5 million tests they've already conducted, are people who had symptoms that they thought would make them people who had coronavirus or had the potential to have it, which means that 20%, less than 20% of the people who've been tested have actually had the virus. Now, it doesn't mean they hadn't been exposed to it already and fought it off, but it means that less than 20% actually had the virus. So to say that this thing is running wild like Hulkamania all over the United States is just not true.
And number 3, we want to have tests deployed to our nursing homes, long-term healthcare facilities, to our vulnerable populations, particularly inner-city minority populations, so that we can watch for any emergence of the coronavirus and deal with it forcefully. What I want to tell your millions of listeners, we have enough testing today for every state in America to go to phase 1. Thanks to the president's leadership.
That is incredible.
Enough testing. It's a testament to American ingenuity, to American free enterprise, to these extraordinary commercial labs, and to the president's leadership. But we have enough testing today for every state in America to be able to test sufficient to move into phase 1. And
So what that means is not that they have enough to test everybody in the United States. Don't get confused if you were confused in the first place. It means that any state that has people that are showing signs of being potentially infected with the coronavirus can be tested. It does not mean every American within every state. Only those who are showing symptoms.
We're continuing to scale testing. We have new tests that are going to be coming online in the next several weeks that will literally add enormous volume to our testing capability. And but testing is not a barrier to any state in America beginning to reopen. And all of your listeners around the country should know that. And as they let their voice be heard, either with a email to their governor's office or a letter to the editor or participating in their First Amendment rights, we have enough testing today for every state in America to go to phase one. Now,
Now, if you don't need a test to reopen, why are we still closed? Why are we still closed? Is it because of the
social distancing? Social distancing. Social distancing.
Is it because of that? Because you think that people staying 6 feet apart from each other is like some kind of weird sign to the virus? I ain't going 6 feet to get that guy. Forget that. I'm lazy, virus. I'm gonna stay right over here. That's not how a virus works. You realize it, right? Viruses don't just live in your face. They live on your clothes. They live on things that you touch for a certain period of time, depending on their free air life. So it's not just like it's not like the testing is apparently even necessary for a state to reopen. Which means if a state didn't want to even bother testing and just reopen, then conceivably they should. And they can. It's not the government that has shut us down. It is the fear of this thing that has shut us down, and the governors who have chosen to follow those, guidelines, as it were.
Go to phase one if they've got 14 days of consecutive declines in cases. They're on a trajectory with that and with hospital capacity to be able to deal with whatever may come. But the American people should know that testing is not a barrier today to entering phase one and opening up America again.
We are speaking with Vice President Pence. What is the reaction of the task force at large? It's made up of many, many people. You have your health experts, Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci. What is the reaction when you see the Stanford study of Santa Clara County showing that the number of cases may actually be greater by a factor of 50 times, meaning there may be many more people infected than we know, which would bring the death rate, the mortality rate, way, way down. USC did a similar study of LA County with, again, the same. We think there may be 50 times the reported number of people infected out there, again, lowering the mortality rate to like the flu, 0.1%. What's the task force reaction when you see that news is being reported across the country?
Well, and I saw this morning, at least it was reported, that Governor Cuomo said that some of their antibody testing was showing a very significant amount of people who had the coronavirus and were not aware of it, were what they call asymptomatic. Well, what I would tell you is it's something that we have been watching for and frankly anticipating for some time.
That's not true in the slightest. Because if that was true in the slightest, that they've been anticipating it, they wouldn't continue to keep the country shut down. Because based on these studies that have gone out, that have been done in New York, that have been done at USC and Stanford, as Rush was just mentioning, what it's showing is that the infection rate is very high. It's incredibly contagious. Apparently, and you'll hear him say this a little bit later on, it's up to 3 times more contagious than the flu. However, if that is the case, it also means that the death rate, the mortality rate, is actually lower than the flu. Because consider this, if it's 3 times more contagious than the flu, that means more people get it. But if less people die from it, than are infected with it, it means the mortality rate compared to the flu, which is 0.1%, it means it's less infectious than the flu, which also means there's a higher likelihood that you build up a herd immunity to it, which means it's not as bad, which also means that those people who get it, who are already compromised in their immune systems, it was unfortunately and sadly as though their bodies, their immune systems were just looking for one more thing to push them over. And it could have been anything. It could have been the flu. If this had happened, if their situation had occurred in December of this last year, it could have been the flu that had caused them to pass away, unfortunately. It just so happened that this was existing at the time. But something was already, their immune systems were already so compromised. Their health was already so unbalanced that they were going to ultimately pay the, what is it? The greatest price man can pay. Or what is the greatest death? The greatest debt. What is it? That national treasure? The debt all men pay, and the debt that all men pay is death. And so, unfortunately, that was going to happen. Just keep that in mind.
Our health experts have been very clear from early on. The fact that the coronavirus is 3 times more contagious than the flu. And the fact that as we have done testing, we have been able to see trends that suggest that many people that have the coronavirus will have either just flu-like symptoms or no symptoms at all. I will tell you that our team will not be surprised to see evidence in the days ahead, particularly as these antibody tests continue to scale across America, that a large number of Americans have been exposed, contracted it, and ultimately developed the antibodies in their system to defeat it, either with mild flu symptoms or no symptoms at all.
No.
So let me tell you with that said, that about a month ago, I had flu-like symptoms that lasted for about a week, which means that there is a high likelihood that I either had the flu or I had the coronavirus. But it disappeared. And it was the same kind of stuff you just normally get with any kind of infection. You get a cough. I didn't have any sneezing. Sneezing wasn't my thing. Mine was just a cough, and that was the biggest thing. And what was the other thing? I think I had a mild fever of some kind, but it wasn't like an obvious fever. It was more like fatigue than a fever. And I don't really remember having a fever. I never took any. I took like Theraflu for a week, and it helped, and it went away. Which means that you're either going to show it or you're not going to show it. It's just very common. And the problem is that we shut down a country without taking the time to evaluate the data for something that is almost more common because of its contagious rate. It's more common, more potential you could find it in people than the flu. And we've never shut down the country for the flu. Not even for the Spanish flu. 102 years ago. 103 years ago.
No symptoms at all.
The good news of all of that, Rush, is that we don't have, this is a new virus, right? So we don't have hard data. The scientists always make that clear to us. But there is the highest likelihood that if you've had this coronavirus in the past, that you will enjoy some immunity from it in the future. And it's among the reasons why our nation, should the coronavirus reemerge at any time in the future, why our nation will be in a much better place. We'll have new medicines called therapeutics. We're working around the clock on vaccines. We're deploying testing to make sure and identify quickly, contact trace, and isolate people that have it. But make no mistake about it, if some of those early studies hold out, there'll be an awful lot of Americans in the fall and in the winter of next year that actually enjoy a degree of immunity from the coronavirus.
You know what it also means? It also means that if another virus comes along that is more intense than this virus, that is more dangerous than this virus, and this government, this administration, or any other administration tries to shut the country down because they're fearing people will die, people will start to see this as like a cry wolf type situation, especially now that this data is coming out a month later. And you look at countries like Sweden, which has virtually the same population as Michigan, and they never shut anything down. They did follow to see what was going on, but they let their people build up herd immunity to the virus. And when you shut down an economy of a country on the notion that you're going to not stop deaths, but you're going to slow down deaths, but at the same time caused traumatic economic hemorrhaging, it is going to be that much harder for anyone else in the future to shut it down without very, very, very clear evidence that it is incredibly fatal. And by the time you're able to prove that, it may be too late. The numbers just weren't there. We went too fast to shut down the country, and the economy has paid the toll, and future administrations are also going to pay a price because it's going to be harder to shut down the country. You're going to have greater resistance to people doing that because they've seen what happened here within 6 weeks.
And that'll also be a bulwark against this as well. So I have to tell you though, as we think about the future, I want your listeners to know that everything that we're looking at every single day is a tribute to what they have done, and we urge them to continue to do it. We urge them to continue to practice that social distancing.
See, this is the problem. I can't say this enough. By telling people to socially distance themselves from each other and to isolate themselves in their homes and not go out unless they need to, you are stopping their immune system from interacting with the virus and building immunity to it. Social distancing is not helping people. Wearing masks is not helping people, because if you were to have you ever seen the movie The Boy in the Plastic Bubble? Now, it's based on a true story, okay? It's based on a true story. And it's a little different. I want to grant you that it's a little different because this kid's immunity system never completely developed. But in theory, just consider it. He was sick. He had to live in an encased, I can't remember the exact term, but he had to essentially live in a space that would not allow germs and viruses or anything that could attack his immune system to get in there, because his body couldn't defend it. His immune system wasn't reactive, in other words. So he had to live in a enclosure to prevent him from getting germs. Well, what you're doing by socially distancing and isolating people from one another, stay 6 feet away from that person, don't go out unless you need to, you're limiting people's exposure to germs and anything that's out, bacteria, anything out there, that their immune system, as soon as it interacts, either before it gets in their body or as it nears their body or whatever, their immune system goes out and attacks it and says, okay, what's your deal? Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm going to, let me see. How do I defend you? Do I kick you in the crotch? Do I slap you upside the head? What, in relative terms, if your, immune system goes gangster, whatever. But the point is that if your immune system starts to try to find ways to defeat it, and without having exposure to it, your immune system cannot figure out how to defeat it. And if it mutates and there's multiple strands of it, it's like your system can't figure out how to fight against all of them at the same time that may exist. So giving exposure to people to this virus and letting them get out and be exposed to it means that they may be one strand and they go, okay, so you need to be slapped upside the head to leave me alone, COVID-19 version A. And here comes along COVID-19 version B. Well, maybe COVID-19 version B does need to be slapped up the head, but then it needs a little second poke in the eye to get it out of the way. But until you find out, and your immune system gets to interact with it, it doesn't know how to defend itself and go, okay, COVID-19A looks a lot like COVID-19B, but COVID-19B looks a little more aggressive and seems to tolerate the head slap. I guess I'll have to poke it in the eye. Until it's able to learn that, it can't defend itself against it.
Continue to use a drive-through at your local restaurant, avoid gatherings of more than 10, listen to your state and local authorities, because as we track this data state by state, county by county, we're getting there, Rush. And I truly do believe if the current trend lines hold, that by early June, we could largely have this coronavirus epidemic behind us, and begin to see our nation open back up and go back to work.
If you're waiting until June 1st for this economy to open back up, you are going to see at least 40 million people having filed for unemployment. At least a third of the companies that could hire them gone. Which means that by the time, if you were uber successful in reopening the country, and you could, that means a third of those 40 million people would not go back to work. Which means that you now have, what would that number be? Somewhere in the range of 14 million people, 13 to 14 million people who are still without jobs. And you can say, well, other companies will open up. Yes, they will, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a year. It's going to take years for people to build up enough equity to start another company. And the longer you keep this economy closed, the longer it takes for that process to begin. And the more layoffs there are, the more small businesses that go out of work, or the small businesses that just close their doors forever.
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much.
So that's Pence's interview. I do like Rush Limbaugh. I think he what is it I heard the other day? He's a little too diplomatic with people. He uses too much diplomacy, which I think he used with Mike Pence here. And there's a funny line I heard the other day about diplomacy, and it said, do you know what diplomacy is? It's a way of telling someone to go to hell in a way that they actually enjoy the trip. And I think that's kind of what this was. It's like, hey, well, here's the issue. We got these antibody tests that are showing it up. But of course, Pence is like, well, we were expecting that. You were? Really? You were expecting that to happen? Then why'd you shut down the country if you knew that there were so many people who were going to turn out to be able to fight it off? Just admit when you don't know something. Just admit, okay, listen, I made a mistake. I had someone the other day go after me on Facebook because here in Houston, we call her, a lot of us affectionately refer to as Commandant Hidalgo. She's the county judge, Lena Hidalgo. She has edicted that beginning Monday, April 27th, we are mandated to wear face coverings everywhere we go. Well, I have no problem with it now. I was irritated when I first heard it, but you know what? I'm just going to wear my Jason mask. I mean, it's going to protect me, right? Because I'm supposed to be, safely protected from, getting the beer cooties, as I call it. So, I encourage people, go wear your damn Halloween mask, because it's already been proven that most face coverings, unless they're like an N95 mask or something that's actually supposed to have any effect on this virus, which it still doesn't stop it from getting under your clothes, but from getting directly to you, it's not going to stop. It's like 2-3% effective, so you might as well wear anything. You might as well wrap some toilet paper around your head. Nothing is going to stop a virus from getting on you. And if you're not covering up your eyes, if someone sneezes, it could still get on your face. It could still get into your skin, to get into your pores. And then what are you going to do? Oh, God, the beer cooties is in me. So I'll just wear a Jason mask. Not going to get on me. Or I'll wear my screen mask. That's even better. I've got a screen mask. There's no way to get anything through that screen mask. There's like wind screens, essentially, on the eyes to make them blurred out. There's absolutely no air holes within the mask at the front of the mask. So I might as well wear that and say, hey, I'm safe. You might as well cover your entire head. Because if you don't cover your entire head, it could still get on you if anyone sneezes or coughs or anything. It doesn't just go, COVID-19 doesn't just go, I got to get in through his nose or his mouth. I got to get in there that way. There ain't no other way to get him sick. Could get into your ear. Someone coughs on you, sneezes on you, if it gets in your ear. You think covering your mouth is going to stop you from getting a virus? They've already said that all of that 20% of the healthcare workers have gotten, what is it, they said 20%? I think it was at least 20% of healthcare workers who are on the front lines going against people who are helping people who have COVID-19 have already gotten it, which means that those N95 masks aren't necessarily, helping them to avoid it. That's 20% of the people who are infected are healthcare workers. So how is it helping them? So, anyways, I feel like he was being a little too diplomatic. And Trump going after Brian Kemp for planning to restart. He didn't exactly go after him yesterday. Now, he did today. This interview occurred in the, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time time zone on whatever it was, Thursday, April 23rd. On the 22nd in the evening, Trump said that he disagreed with Kemp, but that, he was going to do what he wanted to do. On the evening of the 23rd, during his White House task briefing, he said, I'm not happy with Brian Kemp. I'm not happy with Brian Kemp. I'm not happy with Brian Kemp. Well, you know why you're not happy with Brian Kemp, Mr. President? because he looks like he's actually taking action to open the country, and you're inundating people with red tape. And I sincerely believe you think you're helping people, but you're not stopping the virus. The virus doesn't go, okay, no fun here, let's leave, everybody. The virus doesn't just go, okay, there's no party, these people are wearing masks. Screw these people, let's get out of here. It doesn't leave just because you wear a mask and just because you limit the number of people who have exposure to it. It sticks around, and it's going to attack whoever it's going to attack. And some people are going to fight it off, and some people aren't. You're running from death, and death is not even the real culprit because it's not fatal to probably a 99.9%, if not more, population of the United States. It's not fatal. People are going to die. That's the hardest part about life. And death doesn't affect the people who die. It's the living who endure it and who face it. And it's hard. It's hardest for us. But the people who pass away, they're not in pain anymore. They're not suffering. We're the ones who are affected by death. And it's not easy for anyone to see their loved one pass away. And thinking if there was just something I could do. But see, the thing is that there's not really anything that we can do. The spirit can fight as hard as it wants. The body can fight as hard as it wants. But there are some things in the physical realm, and I'm not trying to tell you have to believe in God or a deity at all. That's your personal choice. But there are some things within the physical realm that simply cannot be overcome. And we have to be willing to face it and fight it as best we can. So moving on, here is one of the callers asking Rush about the president's statements regarding Governor Kemp.
Here is Jonathan in New Haven, Connecticut. Welcome, sir. Great to have you here with us.
Hi, Rush. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
So I was pretty disappointed yesterday when the president criticized Governor Kemp. You've always said that the media, despite their best efforts, cannot separate voters from Trump.
Yep.
Do you think we might be headed toward that territory where some of his support does start to get frustrated?
Well, in a circumstance like this virus, this pandemic, and so many people losing their jobs, I noticed that the president is now almost daily in these briefings assuring everybody we're coming back. We're going to come back better than ever. We're going to come back faster than anybody believes. He's trying to maintain his optimism and then talk it up that way. And I sincerely believe that he thinks that he can make it happen. I believe he believes in himself that much. As to, look, there's always the risk that any politician runs in angering their base. And whether or not his comments on Governor Kemp did that or got close to it, I don't believe so, because he made it clear after lodging his criticism to then say the governor's free to do what he wants. I wouldn't have done it. I've told him I wouldn't do it, but he didn't command him not to do it. And then, of course, the press dutifully brings up Dr. Fauci to answer the same question. Dr. Fauci, well, if I were being advised, well, you are, pal. That's why they asked you the question. If I were advising, I certainly wouldn't do this. And I have some questions about this, by the way. Yeah, but when we get 26 million people out of work here. So I don't think he ran the risk. I don't think he distanced himself. I don't think he caused the wedge. But yeah, you're right. He's the only one who can.
Anthony Fauci, Time's sexiest man alive. Explain to me why you are idealizing, or the word escapes me, but why you are heralding a scientist as the sexiest man alive. Well, for that matter, explain to me why you're heralding anybody as the sexiest person alive. And how in any way that is relevant to this situation. Jesus. Explain to me how that works. Explain to me how that benefits anyone. If that is to try and get people to trust him more, because you're like, oh, he's the sexiest man alive, doesn't that make him exciting and worth listening to? It really doesn't, unless you're just a sheep and you follow wherever anybody tells you to go. As a matter of fact, I think Fauci has gotten more than his share of 15 minutes. And I think it's time for him to go back to his office. And, you know, there's a lot of conversation about whether Fauci should even still be there or not. You know, it's easy for me to sit here and tell you I would fire him because I think he's more of a fearmonger than he is a benefit to the situation. Trump is going to have to decide that, and he's going to have to face the consequences of continuing to put him forth to the American people and putting him forward in those press conferences. It's his own, he's putting himself at risk by doing it, the more he has him out there. But as far as him distancing himself from his base, he is. What Rush did in the beginning of this, when the guy said that question, it's like, do you think that that's starting to happen? Rush is like, well, I think, when you have 26 million people that are on unemployment, and that was banter. That was banter while he was trying to figure out what he was going to say, because I think he knows it's starting to happen. And he is trying to flatten that curve. Like the coronavirus, he's trying to flatten that curve of people, thinking Trump is simply not acting fast enough to reopen the economy. I said a few weeks ago to family and friends that the smartest thing Trump could have done is come out on Good Friday and say, you know what? I believe the American people are logical enough, because all these guidelines that they're doing here are essentially suggesting that the American people are not bright enough to practice good hygiene and good protection. The only people who don't practice good hygiene and good protection are people who don't have any self-respect, and people who live in situations where they cannot practice good hygiene. They live in poverty-stricken areas where they have slumlords that are treating them like garbage, which, don't even get me started on slumlords. You have people who are homeless who either are that way because of mental situations or addictions of some kinds, or simply because they prefer to be outcasts in society. They think somehow it is their fight against the system. And all you're doing is hurting yourself, because you're exposing yourself to elements that are dangerous. And I'm not talking about people, although there are elements of people that are dangerous, but you're also exposing yourself to illnesses because you eat out of trash cans, you beg people, you run the risk of pissing somebody off who has a weapon, who's like, get the hell away from me. You run a lot of risks choosing to be homeless unless you're simply someone who's fallen through the cracks of the system and you don't have good mental health care. You don't have the proper medication that you need maybe to balance yourself. You don't have the proper therapy you need to try and help you get through your struggles. Soldiers are, people who are veterans are a good example of this. These people who put their lives on the line for this country, who don't get the proper care they need when they come back into this country after serving in difficult and horrific environments, seeing the kind of things they see. But anyways, I don't want to get on a diatribe about that, but my point is that he is starting to push people away from him because you're pushing people into poverty. You're pushing people into situations where they don't have good standards to live by, and they've worked hard to have good standards to live by. And you're also saying you don't believe they're smart enough to take care of their own personal safety. We have idiots in the world. I'm sorry, that's just reality. If you're looking to wipe out all the idiots, you have to do come up with some kind of a fail-safe test to, acknowledge the idiots and put them aside somewhere and put them in their own, border off, box in Wyoming, and just put rubber walls, padded walls all over the place, and they could just keep running into it. There are going to be idiots. That's just it. There are going to be people who do not have natural common sense. But the majority of people in the country have common sense. And you need to let them exercise it. So this is the last thing I'll do before we go. I do want to make sure that you remember how important it is to maintain your
social distancing, social distancing.
Anyways, this is a great caller that Rush had yesterday, and I want you to check out what he had to say.
I need to get this call up here right now. Dean in Chicago has an excellent question. Dean, are you ready? You prepped? You ready to go on the air?
I am, Rush.
Well, tell us what your question or comment is, because I've got something that's going to dovetail with this right into something Governor Cuomo said. What's your question?
The question is, what is the goal of this policy? Is the policy to prevent the maximum number of deaths? In other words, to minimize the number of deaths, or is it to prevent everybody from not getting sick? If it's the former, you would isolate the vulnerable populations, which are the elderly, particularly in nursing homes, and those that have comorbidities such as diabetes or obesity.
Right.
If the goal is to prevent anybody from getting sick, which is ridiculous, you do what you're doing now, which is you lock everybody up in their house.
Well, the answer to your question may be the latter. It may be they're trying to prevent everybody from getting sick because they think that means everybody's going to die. And the reason I say this, and the reason I want to take your phone call, I have a quote from the I'm Governor and You're Not press conference of Governor Cuomo yesterday. And he said there are protesters, the reporter said to him, there are protesters outside right now. They're honking their horns and they're raising signs. These are regular people. They're not getting a paycheck. Some of them are not getting their unemployment paycheck. And they're saying that they don't have time to wait for all of this testing and they need to get back to work in order to feed their families. It's a female reporter yelling at Governor Cuomo. Said their savings are running out. They don't have another week. They're not getting answers. So the point is, the cure can't be worse than the illness. And Governor Cuomo said the illness is death. What is worse than death? And there he answered your question, Dean. And the fact is the illness is not death. 98% of the people who get the disease recover from it. It isn't death. Your question is right there. It does seem they're trying to prevent everybody from even getting sick.
And the problem with that, Rush, is that you're not going to be able to do that even with social isolation. They had that in California, the Santa Clara and the Los Angeles County studies have shown that this thing is widely.
Yeah, but there's people trying to disprove. Those two surveys are now being impugned, and I agree with them. Don't misunderstand. I think they're right on the money, but there are people out there trying to destroy them because they don't fit the political agenda that is attached here to maintaining the shutdown.
You can't do that. If you do, you're not. First of all, you're not even going to be able to stop the virus if you do this shutdown continuously. The only way to stop a virus is to have herd immunity, and the best.
Did you hear that again? The only way, and he's right. And intelligent doctors will tell you this. Intelligent doctors, I mean doctors who are not looking to be famous on television on task forces. They will tell you this. The way you fight a virus that can affect multiple people is to expose the people to the virus and allow them the opportunity for their immune systems to fight it off and for them to develop antibodies against it. Some in that group of people will die because their immune systems cannot fight it off. But those with stable immune systems will. Those who do not have the ability to fight it off, we learn from that, and we learn to try and find ways to assist in fighting it off by cutting off the majority of people whose immune systems can actively fight it and defeat it. You are allowing the virus to sustain and to stick around. You have to let our immune systems fight it. And doctors who are not looking to be famous will tell you herd immunity works. If Anthony Fauci did not, and Scarf Lady Burke did not have that platform they have, and they were just doctors on television being asked about stuff, then they would understand and probably go along with herd immunity. If they weren't getting their 15 minutes of fame from it.
Policy would be to isolate the groups that are most vulnerable, particularly to death, obviously, and the rest of them, let people mix, let people get sick, let them recover. They've got herd immunity. Life goes on. That's the way it has to be.
That's what Sweden decided to do. That's what Sweden's doing, and they're having what they think is success with it. They've got same population as Michigan. They've got a smaller death rate than Michigan has.
I mean, it's kind of like you and I are approximately the same age. In fact, we're almost the same age. And remember when we were kids, they'd have chickenpox parties because chickenpox was so wildly infective that better yet have everybody get it, get over it, and then move on. And that's the way you got to kind of think about this.
By the way, did you know some people died from chickenpox back in the day? Because their immune systems were not able to fight it off. Go look it up. People can still die of something that is not widely fatal because their immune systems are already compromised in some way. But you hiding them away from that virus and other things that get in the air is actually making it more likely they will become infected and will die because their immune systems have not been allowed reasonable access to fight off that which exists in the air. And unless you intend for us to live in a biosphere of some kind, or biodome, where nothing gets in, we don't allow, then those things are always going to exist, and that need for exposure for our immune systems to combat it is always going to exist. I don't care how many times you've seen Star Trek, how many times you've seen it. I don't care how many versions of it you've seen. You're never going to cure the common cold. It's just a thing that happens. It gets to some people. It doesn't get to some people. You can't do a little hypo spray and suddenly, oh, I feel much better. My cold is gone. It just doesn't happen that way. Nice dreaming, though. Good dream.
It's not fatal to people that are in relatively good health and don't have any underlying.
Yeah, okay, let me play devil's advocate. So let's say I'm a believer in the shutdown, and you say that. I say, well, your way, Dean, going to get our hospitals flooded. Your way is going to get hospitals flooded with all kinds of sick people that we're not going to be able to handle.
I don't think that that's correct. I think the initial shutdown was done because we didn't have the data as to who's going to get sick. And I understand that. I understand the president comes in, somebody comes into his office and says, 2 million people are going to be dead. He's got to take some action. Well, now you have the data. You can get rid of the models. You now have the data. And the data is that the overwhelming majority of the people, and you're talking like 95% of the people that are hospitalized in New York or in any other hot spot, are elderly people that have underlying conditions, or they're morbidly obese, or they have diabetes. This is the data that we have.
I know. The age is like 74 to 79. The median, or the average age in New York is that high. So you're right about that.
So I'm telling you, this is going to be a disaster, and the president needs a counterweight or a couple of counterweights to Doctors Fauci and Birx, particularly Fauci. He needs to listen to some other people that are immunologists and infectious disease specialists that he needs to get. Fauci has to be cross-examined on this stuff because we don't know where we're going.
Yeah, we do. See, we do know where we know where a specific political entity wants to take us.
And see, this is one of the things that concerns me about President Trump. I actually support President Trump, even though I believe it because he has tried to cut regulation. He's talked about trying to decrease the size of government. And I truly believe he wants to do that. And I don't believe in big government. I would say I probably lean more conservative libertarian, maybe more libertarian conservative in my views, because I believe government is not the answer. They are the problem. There is a general structure that should exist in government, but not an expansive government. Because every time you create a new department that has oversight over this and over that, over this, over that, it reduces constitutional rights that were established by our forefathers. And the challenge for Trump is that he's, for the last 3 years plus, he has been confronted with constant opposition, constant accusations about him being this way and him being that, none of which I think any of them actually believed. It was their storyline, okay? It's just like a soap opera. It's like he's the ultimate bad guy on a soap opera in their mind, and so they start talking about all the things he did that were just evil. He's evil. He is Satan. They start doing that. And so what you have is you've got to, after 3 years of that, in the midst of this final impeachment effort, which they closed in the early part of February when they finally voted it acquittal, they started this very shortly after. At first it was, don't shut anything down, don't shut anything down. Then he shut stuff down. And then they were like, he didn't act fast enough. Meanwhile, before that, they were saying, don't shut anything down. But then he shuts things down, and they're like, he didn't act fast enough. Well, wait a second, you didn't want it the other way. The point of it all is that I just knocked my fan over. The point of all of this is another political hit job. And this one is actually working. This one is actually working. Because if Trump had not acted this way, we would not have the economy so devastated right now, to the point where we've lost more jobs than we gained since in the last 12 years. It'll probably be 20 years by the time this is all over. At least 20 years. They've already said that we're almost equal to the Great Depression, which would mean almost 100 years, just about 90 years. And we have this, but we had a great economy 8 weeks ago. And record highs in the stock market. And now we're here. This is another political hit job because the media, there's just too many sheep in the world. And you can't stop a sheep from being a sheep. There has to be some kind of action done to the sheep to change the sheep's perspective on being herded. If one sheep gets hit too hard in the head, it might go, yeah, I don't like that anymore. I actually think you're trying to keep me in line and trying to keep this thing working. I think you're actually trying to hurt me, and I don't want that anymore. And that sheep will defy it. Another sheep might not like it when you keep calling the sheep names. And the sheep's like, that really sounds like an aggressive, hateful name. You're really trying to hurt me. But unfortunately, there are a lot of sheep in the world. And it takes something to stir the sheep out of his natural reaction to fall in line. And the media knows how to scare people. That's what the news is. Anthony Robbins said a long time ago, and I'm sure he wasn't the first to say it, but it's just true. The news is not designed to inform you. It's designed to startle you. In a lot of ways, I believe this to be ultimately true, that the news is basically the longest running soap opera on television. And they need you to feel that way because you keep coming back, because it pushes your emotions up and down. First they scare you, then they show you a cute little sign of a puppy dog. Oh, look, he's the puppy dog. Look how many cute little dogs we're saving. Oh, I like the puppies. And then you come back the next day because you get that emotional ride. The bad guys get up on you, but then the girl saves the puppies and everybody's happy. But this is hurting Trump. This is hurting him politically. It's the most, I would say this is the most successful hit job they've done on him. Why? Because now it's not just the people who didn't like him who are unhappy with him. It's the people who liked him who are unhappy with him because of the actions he's taken to shut down the government.
This was my point yesterday. They have told us for 4 years what they've been trying, 3 years. They have lied to their teeth about any number of things in an effort to reverse the election results of 2016. And then failing that, they've tried to get rid of Trump every which way. And this is just them hoping that this virus will do what Robert Mueller and Adam Schiff failed to do. We know what this is why it makes no sense to believe anything these people are saying after 4 years or 3 years of evidence that they have lied to their teeth about everything they've told us. And they didn't just all of a sudden wake up and start telling us the truth just because this is a serious virus. And the reason I wanted your question, are they trying to stop people from dying or getting sick? Because it clearly appears, if you listen to Fauci, if you listen to any of these medical people, you're right. It seems like their objective is to shield people from getting the virus so that they do not get sick. There's no amount of sequestering. There's no amount of sheltering in place that is going to accomplish that. What do you pick a date? August 1st? Okay, we'll have beaten the virus. No, not until something's done about the virus, not in terms of vaccine or what have you.
I think the other problem you're going to have, Rush, is that by following this policy, you're going to guarantee a second wave. I don't know the magnitude of the second wave, but you will guarantee a second wave. People need to get out, mix, get the disease. For most of them, it will be mild symptoms, as the Vice President said earlier in your show, or no symptoms at all. Then they acquire immunity, and life goes on. The problem the President has is that this is like a freight train. This is like a 500-car freight train that you've ground to a halt in a very short time. So you're not going to be able to crank this baby up as quickly as the President hopes. At least I don't think so.
Well, yeah, because the people who are going to make that happen don't have any money right now.
Correct.
They're out of, I mean, okay, you open the movies, go with what?
And that's exactly right. See, that's the other thing. This stimulus package, which supposedly or sent $1,200 to 80 million Americans or whomever number of people who had sent the money to, that money was already gone before it had ever arrived. Because the people who are out of work, immediately spent it on rent or food or utility bills or their car payment or whatever else. It was gone before it arrived. Now people are living off credit cards. They're living off credit cards. And the sooner you get them back to work, the sooner you stop oppressing people and allowing them to be kept at bay by governors who are telling them, you can't go to work. We're trying to save your life. They're not really saving. I don't honestly believe these people are saving anyone's lives by isolating you from other people. As a matter of fact, I think if anything, they're risking your immune system's ability to combat this virus and other things that might be generating in the air. So, that said, the country being shut down and the economy hemorrhaging the way it is, people are living off credit cards, and unless you get people going back to work ASAP, like right away, there's not going to be any money to spend on anything when you open it up. It'll be just as empty as it was when you had the shutdown because nobody's going to have any money. Right now, they're living off credit cards. If you get the businesses open, they'll start spending some money on a restaurant to go dine out or to go get their hair did or get their nails did. You'll get that. You'll get people going back to the gyms. They're not going to go and, pay for their gym while they can't go and use their gym. You'll get money back into the gyms. People will start being reemployed. People will start having an income again. People will start going back to restaurants. People will start going back to manicurists, to the hair salon, all these places. And society will open up and the economy will start to rebuild. It will happen slowly. But the longer you keep it closed, the less money have. The less money people have, the less ability they have to go and buy things when you finally reopen it. And a lot of the small businesses are far by the day every time you keep this economy closed. Every day is another day that multiple small businesses vanish. And they don't ever come back because they don't have the money.
You open the restaurants, go with what? It's going to take a while. People have to go back to work, start earning money. How many of those jobs are going to be available right off the bat? By the way, we're talking with Dean in Chicago, who is not anybody famous. He's just a caller. And we like to try to keep people advice over, but he had a great question. It's a great, I'm not trying to pad your ego, but this is really the best way I've heard of putting this in perspective, the objective. Are we trying to keep people from dying or just keep them from getting sick? And it's obvious. Now, they would tell us, no, we're trying to save the people to limit the death rate. But they're doing that, assuming this thing kills everybody. They're doing that by trying to shield anybody and everybody from getting the virus.
Sam's Club, notification, 12:21 p.m.
Isn't possible.
And I think that the last point would be...
By the way, I apologize. This is a pre-recording, and I, as you heard, voiceover activated on my phone. That was part of the recording because I recorded this using the Bluetooth on my phone. on my phone. So my apologies for that little thing.
That with the death rate is probably going to fall much below. It's going to fall below the flu, is my estimation, given what you've seen in these preliminary studies out of Santa Clara County.
Let me tell you, when this is all over, whenever it is, the debate is going to be, was any of this necessary?
And you know what? He's right. The debate is going to be, was any of this necessary? And do you know what the news media is going to say? Trump reacted too fast and destroyed our economy without getting enough data before doing so. It's not going to be about the number of lives he saved. Right now they're saying, don't open it up. Don't open it up. You're going to kill people. But once it's proven, and it is commonly known that this thing is more contagious than the flu and less fatal than the flu, the story is going to change on a dime, and the story is going to be Trump shut down the economy, devastated people, put tens of millions of people out of work without having the proper data to do so. And the Democrats said so. The Democrats told them not to do it. And you know what? They have those little clips back in February, late February, January, telling him not to do it. And they can play him. They even have Fauci doing it. Even Fauci saying, don't be scared. I wouldn't be worried about it. Go to the gym, go on vacations. Even he said it. And he's not going to suffer any consequences for it. All he has to say was, well, my president told me he wanted me to, follow this, create this critical, plan to keep people safe. And my job is to do it. My job isn't to question the president. And any of the stuff he said, he will turn against Trump. I can't imagine anyone with good sense that doesn't know Fauci is already going to turn on Trump. Fauci is clearly liberal and clearly not a Trump supporter. He's already shown himself on stations like CNN and I don't care if you're a liberal, but if you or you're a Democrat, that's really that's insignificant. But the point is that if you will then take that opportunity when you were one of those voices telling people not to do stuff and trying to keep the country shut down, and then later on you come back and say, well, I encouraged him not to do it. I told him it wasn't going to be that bad. I even said it. Here's a sound clip of me saying it wasn't going to be that bad. Yeah, he did it. I was just following orders. He made me do it. Trump gets the blame for that. Not Fauci, not Burke, not Pence. Trump. Trump. And they know it. And they're just waiting for the right moment. It's coming. By the fall, we'll be able to blame Trump for destroying the economy. How are we going to do that? We have these sound bites of Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden telling him not to shut the borders and not to shut down the country. We have Fauci telling podcasts and people that there was no problem with it and that they should just go about their lives because this was no threat to the United States. Yeah, but Fauci was on all those task press conferences talking about all the dangers. We don't show that stuff, dummy. We aren't going to show that. We're going to show the parts where Fauci and Pelosi and Joe, our nominee for president, we're going to show where they said, don't shut down the economy. You're going to destroy it. It's xenophobic. You're racist. But Trump still did it, and we get to blame it on him. we run the news cycle. We can show whatever we want, and all we have to do, if anybody challenges it, we'll bring Fauci on, and Fauci can say, I was just following orders. I work at the discretion of the president, and the president told me to do this, and so I just did what the president told me to do. Trump told him to shut down the economy and destroy everything, put tens of millions of people out of work. Man, he hurt us. And for those who do not like Trump, it's an easy reach to that. It's an easy step into that circle. And for those who are on the fence, who don't understand, all they need is a little push to get them inside the circle. And for those who are angry, it's enough to say, here's the footage of them telling you not to shut down the economy, and he did. It's going to hurt Trump. It is going to hurt him. And the sooner he gets out of it, the better.
You mark my words. That's what this debate is going to be. The Democrats don't care as long as this elects a Democrat in November. That's their objective with this. Yeah, basically.
I think that, and I think one last thing. I think it's important for people to feel confident, and I think the president has to do whatever he can to get the therapeutic studies completed as quickly as possible, so that people know that even if you acquire this, and even if you get like bad flu symptoms or whatever, you've got a therapeutic that you can take, whether it be hydroxychloroquine or remdesivir or whatever.
Whatever it is. I mean, they're giving nicotine patches to some people now, claiming that smokers, of all people, are the least likely to get the disease.
That's a real anomaly.
Well, no, I can actually give you some actual evidence on that, anecdotal, but I'll do that in just a minute. The one thing that you say the president needs to do this, do that. Jim Cramer, I don't know if you heard the soundbite in the first hour, CNBC Mad Money guy. He says Fauci is destroying these briefings every day. Whatever hope happens to be conveyed before Fauci stands up, Fauci destroys it.
And I think, well, Fauci becomes the center of attention. I mean, it's like he's the de facto president of the United States. I mean, this is insane. And this is what goes back to my point before. The president never had anybody come in to cross-examine Fauci on his proposals. Some infectious disease expert who will take a look at these and cross-examine him and his model makers as far as what they're proposing and the impact of this and why is this going to be effective. They did these models with no data at all, no profile of any population.
I actually think it's worse than I think it's worse than that they're not bringing anybody in to cross-examine or to challenge Fauci. I think the way I know how Washington works, you get this guy Fauci. He is loved and adored and respected by the media, which is what every freaking Republican dreams of. And so there might be, hey, I agree with Dr. Fauci. I'm with Dr. Fauci. I love being with Tony. I like Dr. It might well be that there are some people attempting to achieve what they can't on their own by sidling up to Dr. Fauci. Because Fauci has achieved the status that everybody in Washington wants. He's thought to be apolitical. He's thought to not have a care about politics. Fauci is not assumed to have a political interest at all. He is thought to be totally and strictly and exclusively devoted to the health of the American people. And therefore, since he's apolitical and since he doesn't have any political inclinations, doesn't even appear to have a political identity, you can't criticize him.
Do you know who else they said that about before in the news? Before it was shown that he was not apolitical? James Comey.
Well, that's what I was thinking about. The problem that the president has is that...
Oh, and also Robert Mueller. He is not caught up in anything. He is completely apolitical. He's worked for Republicans before, so he can be honest.
He's got Dr. Fauci is almost like his one-man advisor. I would not say to get rid of Dr. Fauci. He's obviously very knowledgeable, and he brings a particular perspective. What you do with Dr. Fauci is that I think you have to dilute his influence. You have to bring in other people who are equally as knowledgeable but have different perspectives on this thing, and then you use the data that's now available and is continuing to come in to decide which course of action to follow.
All right, let me play devil's advocate with you, Dean. Let's say the president were to do that. The president would find somebody that would question or maybe have a different take on or openly challenge Dr. Fauci in his assertions, either privately or publicly. And when the press learns of that, you know what the story is going to be. Trump throws Fauci overboard, attempts to humiliate him in front of White House press corps. That's what every Republican knows is going to happen if they go against anybody chosen and protected by the drive-by media.
Well, I would never have this kind of debate in public. I mean, this is for the benefit of the president. The president makes policy. But it's important that the president hear other perspectives.
Somebody's going to tell Maggie Haberman is the point if it happens.
Well, then, the president can simply come out and say, "I want to get the perspectives of everybody. I need to get the best advice from a significant number of people, so that I can synthesize the information and set the policy for the country." He's not doing that now. That's the problem.
Well, this can't go on.
So that's it. That is the big stuff that happened on Limbaugh yesterday, and I wanted to do a commentary on it, and I know this is just unbelievably long, but there's things obviously that, like you, and I'm sure I missed some of this too, but we're commenting on this stuff and stating where we find the problems or things that have not been said that should be said or should be considered, or supporting what they're saying. And I just think it's important to have that out there. I hope, quite frankly, if you're listening to this now or 10 years from now or, whenever you may be listening to this, that it gets you to thinking when you're listening to something and you're listening to something about, significant events happening in society in the United States. Really, any country you're in. 1 second. And it's got you critically thinking and kind of talking back to your, audio device and saying, well, what about this and what about that? Free thinking and free kind of, free thought and sort of spitballing and listening to what's happened. Spitballing is not correct, but listening to what you're hearing and kind of commenting back and, well, what about this and what about that? It's good for you. Questioning is good for you. Thinking about things is good for you. Looking for reference points of things that have happened is good for us all. And we have to do that. So I'm sorry it's long, but you love being here with me, right? Yeah. If you're the first person to come across this or the 174th million person to come across this, then where the hell's my money? I'm just kidding. I don't want money. I want coupons. Coupons to Chili's. So before we go, though, I would like to indulge you for a minute, if you would. And I saw the press conference with the president tonight on the evening of April 23rd, after this Pence interview and all that. And I saw his response, and what he said was, I am not happy with Brian Kemp. I'm not happy with Brian Kemp. But beyond his statement about Brian Kemp, I just saw a man who's really stressed and frustrated. And it doesn't matter who's in the White House. This is not an easy job. It is the hardest job, I would argue, in the world. Because while you can be a president that is strongly supported by the media and hated by the public, or vice versa, it is a very weighing thing. Look at how much Barack Obama aged during his 8 years in the White House, and he's not even that old. But look how much he aged being in that White House. It is so heavy on a human being. And we need to pray for them to have the right guidance and right support, and that they have the presence of and the guidance of thought and I can't even think of the exact right word, but we need to pray for their well-being, because life does go on after the White House. It has to. There has to be. It can't be that you go to the White House, you serve, and then you die. You have to have something after it, and they have to know that they're appreciated for what they've tried to do, whether they're successful or not. No one is 100% successful all the time. It's just not the way it works. So I pray for all presidents, but in this situation, I'd like to pray for this president. And if you care to join me, then feel free to. If not, feel free to exit this podcast and go do what's right for you. But here's where we go. Dear God, please offer our president, Donald J. Trump, your guidance and grace during this difficult time. Leadership is the ultimate sacrifice for others. It is a rocky road filled with so many bumps and so many hazards, all in the effort to try and serve a massive population of people and do the best by them. Like those who have come before him, we have faith that he is doing his best to help in the ways he believes will help. Please let him know and feel that faith and love that those of us who do support him feel for him. Please let that energy surge through his spirit and empower him to continue to follow those instincts that attracted us, those of us who have supported him from the beginning and those who have grown to support us since, as he tries to excel the quality of life for all of those people in the United States. And take care of the man. Take care of the person, the soul. Let him know that above all of the hate which seems to rise as heat to the top, there is gratitude and love and appreciation and respect for what he does at the base, and that is the most important thing. Please help him to find peace and to not let a job push him to a very unhealthy and risky place in his own life. He's journeyed for 70 plus years on this planet. He's loved, he's lost, just like all of us. He's a human being who deserves a feeling, not only that he is of value, that he is valued and appreciated and loved. We pray for our troops. We pray for our healthcare workers. We pray for all those infected and dealing with the symptoms of this and any virus. And we pray for the souls that have moved beyond the mortal realm and joined you. Give our people grace. Let love find its way through all of the politics. Let us stand as one country, if in no other way, but in loving our country and wanting the very best for each other, in whatever way we feel that is. There's no right answer to everything. You didn't create us to be right. You created us to experience existence and search for answers. Please help us to realize we keep looking for answers and that our president is looking for answers, and we have to support him in finding those answers. We love you for existence. We thank you for the opportunity to experience this realm, to live, to love, to dream, to aspire, to succeed, to fail, to recover, to build, to cherish. Thank you for life. Please help our president know, and all those in the world know, that faith has never left them, and love has never left them. You have to simply reach out and take it in your hand. We pray this and for all good things for President Trump, for the people of the world, for the people of the United States. In the name of your Son, who you gave for our salvation. Amen.